Welcome home, everyone. As always, thank you for joining me on this day. There is much to share with you. In just a few moments, we're going to take you to Nigeria for the very latest there, where the government is facing criticism from certain quarters about its decision to extend the lockdown of certain key states, and also taking some heat for the decision to ask China for help. We'll bring you the very latest from Lagos in just a few moments. Also, the rumbling of a fast approaching recession is on the minds of many, as millions of jobs for Africans could be on the line. We're going to take you to Senegal, where we're going to speak to a mall owner about what coronavirus could mean for his business and what, if anything, business owners can do to contain the economic fallout. Plus, in these trying times, faith is on the minds of so many people. As we all know, Easter just ended, and for the world's Christians who were unable to gather in large numbers, it really drove home our new disturbing reality. So how are pastors comforting their congregations during these times? We're going to put those questions to a pastor. Tony Rapu will be here on the show with me. We have that and so much more in the hour ahead. So let's jump right in. All right. Well, there were millions of dashed hopes in Nigeria on Monday night as the president, Muhammadu Buhari, announced in his televised address that the lockdown would be extended for Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun states. The reason? Well, he said quite simply, it is a matter of life and death. Journalist Simon Kalowole joins me now on the phone from Lagos with more on what the president said and the reaction. Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good to have you on the show once more. So tell me what exactly President Buhari had to say, the key points of yesterday's address, and really the mixed reaction he's receiving.
Yeah, before the president announced the extension of the lockdown, virtually everybody was expecting him to do so because we are still having problems being able to trace those who had contact with the patients. Therefore, it didn't come as a surprise to so many people when he announced that he was extending, even though the desire of most people was for him to relax the lockdown. And his own reasons were very simple. Lagos remains the epicenter. The Federal Capital Territory, there are recorded cases, even though there are no recorded deaths. And then not many deaths. Now, for him, until able to stop the community transmission or slow it down, we cannot begin to talk about lifting the lockdown.
As you said,
2 weeks extension.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I don't think anyone was surprised that it was extended, but there is still some discomfort. People were hoping against hope that it would come to an end, and there are reports and there's video out there of people increasingly becoming frustrated because of the hardships caused by being unable to move freely. Talk to us about that and what you're seeing, what you're hearing about. Unrest may be too strong a word, but certainly tensions that are rising in certain parts of the country.
Yeah, we are actually at a risk of an uprising. We're at a risk of a social disorder. Most people in Lagos State in particular, probably 80-90% are self-employed. They live from hand to mouth, so it is what they make on a daily basis that they feed themselves and their families with. So it is very difficult for some in Nigeria. They are employed by the government. The major income earners are government employees. So when the government tells them to sit at home, they know their salaries will still come at the end of the day. But for Lagos State, it's the most thriving economy in Nigeria. One day is a lot for anyone. The petty trader, the woman who is selling foodstuff, the driver, the bus driver. It's a lot for them to stay at home for so long. Now we also have a situation where you have a lot of unemployed youths. I think the situation has been like this for a long time. So now we have a situation at hand in which they don't even have an opportunity to make money. Some of them used to extort money on the road for motorists and all that. But now there's nothing, no source of income for them. There's nothing for them. So the incentive for them to go out and start vandalizing and start robbing is very high now.
What's the government's response to this? Clearly, people are responding for the most part to their struggles, their economic hardship. What is the government doing to alleviate these problems that individuals are facing? You mentioned the large numbers that are part of the informal economy. Are they scaling up assistance to households? Are they going to do more to help?
Well, we have three levels of government in Nigeria. We have the federal government, we have the state government, then we have the councils. All of them have made promises to reach out to the less privileged, to give them some palliatives, foodstuff and all that. But what we are hearing in Lagos is that these things have been hijacked by the politicians who are not really distributing, they are not allowing these palliatives to reach the right number of people. And even where they reach people, they are not significant enough to last them for a number of days. That is what we are hearing. So now the federal government decided to change the contractors. It's handing up directly to the state government, whatever the federal government wants to give to the people, they want to give it to the state government. And that the president ordered yesterday to increase the number of households that will benefit from the palliatives. So there's always this fear that of hijack, this fear of corruption in the system, which we cannot ignore because not many people have really claimed to have received these palliatives, in Lagos State in particular. Maybe some other states where the population is not as much as Lagos. Maybe it's going around. But the government is really making efforts the federal government, the state government making efforts. But you can be sure that something untoward happened.
Well, to give people some context, Lagos State with a population of approximately 21 million people. Simon, very quickly, one last question. The Chinese doctors, or at least the Chinese government was approached for assistance by the Nigerian government. What's the latest on that? I had seen reports that a group of doctors had arrived. They'd initially been in quarantine for 14 days, but we're now out of that. Do you have any more details? Are those reports actually accurate?
Well, the impression we had at the beginning was that the federal government was inviting them to come and share experience with us. They have more experience in management of the coronavirus outbreak than Nigerian doctors. That was the original news we got from the government. And this was being defended by the Minister of Health when the doctors were complaining that the Chinese could bring more of us to Nigeria. A lot of fake news going around that it was when it got to Italy that the epidemic exploded in Italy. So the Minister of Health defended it that, no, they are here to share knowledge. They are not going to have any contact with the patients and all that. But along the line, the Chinese construction company in Nigeria says, no, they are our guests. They are not guests of the federal government. We brought them in there as part of our corporate social responsibility. And we are going to keep them. We are going to quarantine them in our facility. They will be here with us for 14 days before they make any contact with anybody in Nigeria. So the story changed along the line. From the federal government bringing in the doctors, and now it's a private company that is bringing in the doctors. But there's this apprehension among Nigerians, a lot of fake news going around that this virus is a deliberate effort to reduce population, to do this and that. So you can understand when people are fidgeting, when people are panicking over the Chinese doctors coming to Nigeria. You can understand the circumstance under which they have such fears.
Yeah. Simon Kalowole, thank you for your insight on this day, joining us on the phone there from Lagos. We appreciate it. Clearly, the story, the narrative around the Chinese doctors and how they got to be there needs to be investigated further. But we very much appreciate the update. Thank you so much. Please be safe.
You're welcome. Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Well, again, I think the key point to just stress there before we move on is the growing tensions in Nigeria. So we'll be watching the country closely. The lockdown they extended for those three key states, Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State, for another 14 days. And there's growing dissatisfaction as people complain of the hardship. So we will be watching what happens. More questions about this invitation or non-invitation to the Chinese government for help with Nigeria's response to the coronavirus pandemic. All right. Well, this pandemic, as we all know, continues to overwhelm governments and health systems right around the world. But in Africa, the caseload has been comparatively low and thankfully manageable. However, there is a however here. The officials at the World Health Organization fear that the window of opportunity to ensure that this situation does not surge, that the case numbers don't surge on the continent, that window may be closing and closing fast. Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Michel Yao. He's with WHO Africa. He's the emergency operations manager. And I asked him how quickly the virus is spreading across the continent. Take a listen. Dr. Michel Yao joins us now. Thank you so much for your time once again, Dr. Yao.
A pleasure.
At this stage, how fast is the coronavirus spreading in Africa?
At this stage, it's spreading faster. In some of the countries like Algeria, Egypt, and South Africa, in these countries, we are worrying about the spread. But these days, we also noticed new countries like Niger, even Cote d'Ivoire, that are reporting a number of cases. But in all of them, they have not reached the high peak yet, like what we are observing in Europe. But we are worrying about the way it's spreading. We can divide the African countries in three groups. The first group is countries that still have less than 20 cases. So this is roughly around 19 countries for the whole Africa. And countries between 20 and 100 cases, we have 15 countries. And then countries above 100 cases, that is about 18 countries, if I count it well. So there is still some window for these countries that still reporting sporadic cases to really strengthen their response and to contain the outbreak. So there is worry for some of them, but some still have chance for containment.
When you talk about strengthening the response and the opportunity that exists, I mean, first of all, let's talk about the most urgent, those countries above 100 cases. I say, according to your off the top of your head, that's about 18 countries. For those countries, what is the strategy in place there now? I mean, are they still testing according to WHO guidelines, which is, the sick, those who've had contact with the sick, or those who've been to countries with, a high burden of cases? Is that still the guideline, even in those countries with 100 cases plus, or are you now telling them to test everyone?
Well, the ideal is actually to test what they call it high-risk contact, people that were likely to have been in contact with a positive case. The challenge that most of these countries have, African countries, is the availability of reagents. Despite some of the good will from these countries and support from WHO, we are really struggling to get because of the scarcity in the market and also some of the supply chain related to the fact that we have less cargo availability worldwide to send some of the supply. So in regard to that, the advice is that if you have capacity, then you can test wider. Because what we notice mainly in the African context, we have quite a number of people that are asymptomatic. But being positive and asymptomatic, you can still spread the disease. So this is a challenge. Some of the countries who with support from others, friend countries, they got more reagents, so they are in this step. Soon, the rapid tests, some of them will also be available on the market. So we have few, but few that did not sometimes meet the standards because they were not as accurate that they should be in terms of sensitivity to detect. So this is where countries have challenge on the market, but the ideal would have been to test most of the high-risk contact that they have around a given case.
Okay, the testing is just the one piece, as you and I both know. There's also the contact tracing, there's the isolation. Where are those two in this sequence? How robust is that? Is that paradigm, if you will, or is that the operation as you look across the continent?
Looking across, we are a bit disappointed. Because we don't really see a strong effort made. And in countries that have above 100, and if you have an average of 50 cases per day, it's becoming a challenge to have a strong contact tracing process. We are now advising them. They were using some of the electronic system to track polio cases. We are advising countries to actually try to use the same system for self-reporting and so on that can improve the contact tracing. But looking across, many of these countries have poor contact tracing. But it's one of the critical things. If you can follow all of your contacts, it's likely that the next positive case will come among these contacts, and then you can easily interrupt the chain of transmission. But as long as you don't put effort in this one, and to do so is to increase the number of people involved, is to involve more partners like community-based NGOs, so to name only a few of them, like a Red Cross, that they have a network across many of the countries, and being involved in this system can help many countries to actually have a proper contact tracing. So some of the approaches are not fully implemented yet, and it's our worry.
So I need to ask you, what is standing in the way of countries in Africa from building this robust response and including partners? Is it will? Is it in some ways a failure to grasp with the risk, which seems ridiculous because you can see across the world what coronavirus and COVID-19 have done to developed well-resourced nations. So what is the stumbling block that is standing in the way of building these robust networks for contact tracing and bringing in partners that may be on the ground, like the Red Cross that you just mentioned?
I think on this one, of course, there is a political will really to mobilize as much as they can to deal with it, and it's required mobilization at all the levels, including religious leaders and all the leaders. The second component is that they are not used to. They are used to this outbreak that just move slowly. I think many of them don't realize that this is a disease that spread very fast, even faster than Ebola, that is another deadly disease. So I think it's for them.
How can you not know that by now, that this thing moves fast, that it's infecting, one person is infecting between 2 and 3 people? That is commonly known information, right? The first case was in December in Wuhan. It was in the US by January 20th. How do we not know that? I don't follow.
No, it's if you look at even some of the countries like in Europe or maybe in other continents, the kickoff is quite slow. Many of them were not used to this kind of outbreak. So to set up a system that will be up to speed, sometimes it takes time. But what we are surprised of in Africa is that we are the continent, maybe the last one that will experience an upsurge. So we could have learned and we could have done it better. Usually what we do is that we send experienced experts to help to move, to kick off and move faster. But unfortunately, this time we are dealing with 47 countries. We have sent already hundreds of experts, and it's difficult to send more because of the transportation constraint that we have. Many of the airlines have been grounded, so it's making it difficult for us to send staff that will help them to kick off. The other thing, what we notice in some of the countries is that they are not listening, and they are not even, they have a kind of shadow offices dealing with an outbreak instead of opening up to have the critical stakeholders, including WHO experts, sitting on the table, analyzing with them, and advising them adequately. So these are the challenges that we are facing.
Which countries are you seeing that kind of shadow operation without full transparency?
There are many of them.
I noticed you refuse to answer which countries. Maybe you'd be willing to tell us which regions are of most concern to you in terms of lack of transparency.
I may say that it's many of the countries. If our region, we are covering 47 countries. We have less than 10 countries that are sharing a comprehensive, what we call line listing. If you have, they are sharing the numbers. This is, we should not misinterpret. But for us to do a proper analysis is that each case have a number of indicators that is required for the analysis: age, sex, which location, etc. When we have this comprehensive list, even if there is no capacity in the country, we can do a proper analysis to see where the disease is spreading, where are the contacts, and also which age group is the most affected. But if we don't have this detailed analysis, and if this analysis cannot be done at country levels, it's a kind of coordinating or trying to implement the response without having a proper evidence and a proper guidance. So this is the challenge. So it's becoming a kind of a political issue where sending data is a challenge.
Dr. Michel Yao, I always appreciate your time and the information you share with me and my viewers. So thank you once more, and thank you for the work you're doing. Come back and talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I found a lot of what I heard from Dr. Yao disturbing there, that a number of countries on the continent are not, according to him, being fully transparent. They're not giving all the data. You can report the numbers that are of confirmed cases of infections, you can report the number of deaths, but according to Michel Yao from the World Health Organization, they need more access to the data, and certain countries aren't providing that. And the WHO is seeing politics get involved and political will standing in the way of a more robust response. This is not a time for politics. This is a time for us to come together and put in place the measures we need to save our populations. Deeply, deeply troubling. The statements made by Dr. Yao we're going to put to political leaders in the days ahead to get a sense of what exactly is happening and where we're seeing the blockages. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you to everybody who's been writing in from all over the continent, from Gambia, from Cameroon, lots of comments. I'm going to get to them a little bit later. So thank you. I just want to acknowledge that I see them and I'm grateful, and thank you for staying with me. I want to move on and bring our next guest in because he too will have a perspective that's important and some encouraging words that I think we all need right now. Several months into this pandemic, there is confusion, there is fear, there is uncertainty. More and more people are turning to faith, to their faith, as we struggle to answer questions like, when will there be a vaccine? When will this end? What will life look like after this is all over? Questions that I am considering, questions I know many of you are pondering upon a great deal. Easter has just finished. We know that for the world's Christians, a strange time, unable to gather in large numbers due to these social distancing restrictions. And so, it's been on my mind a great deal how, to ask how, those who lead congregations, be they Muslim, be they Christian, be they whatever faith, how are they comforting their congregants at this moment in time? And I'm so pleased that Dr. Tony Rapu joins me now. He's senior pastor of the House of Freedom, and he joins me now from Lagos, Nigeria. Pastor Rapu, thank you for being with me.
Thank you, Aisha.
It's so good to have you. Listen, I want to ask you the question that I'm certainly intrigued about is whether you personally have seen an increase in the need for your counsel since this whole thing began. Tell me about your experiences there in Lagos.
Absolutely. So COVID-19 is not just a health crisis or an economic crisis. It's also a spiritual crisis. So people are questioning. I mean, think about it. The very foundations of what you believed in are being shaken. There is a global crisis. People don't know who to turn to. People are dying. The health systems are failing. And governments themselves don't seem to be so certain. And this naturally calls for questioning. And for many people, times like this, you want to go to a higher power. You're asking, is there God? Where is he in this? What do we do? Is this the end of the world? What are we supposed to do? And so we have seen a lot of people who are afraid, who are terrified, who are in a panic. And so times like this is when the church then comes alongside to calm people's fears down and to teach them the truth about God in times like this.
It's interesting you said at times like this is when the church comes alongside, except we're in a time where with physical limitations and restrictions due to social distancing, you can't do it the way you would have normally, I'm sure, preferred to have done it. So talk to me about how you are adapting. I mean, it's, again, one thing for, a Sunday service or a midweek service, but how are you in that day to day? How are you making people feel that closeness that they so desperately need?
Well, the good thing about today's world is that the church is in a journey of a digital transformation. So there are quite a few people who have migrated to an online experience. So that truly helps. And so we're able to have services online, and we're able to reach out to people through online counseling and online prayer meetings. All our meetings have gone online. I mean, since the lockdown and since we've got to practice social distancing. But then the question is, what happens to those who are not online? Because
That's
in
right.
this environment, not everyone has access to digital experience, and the digital penetration is low in some areas and in some age groups. So that is where we then have to make phone calls. We call people on the phone. And then recently we've been able to reach out to those who because of the lockdown and economic condition, maybe run out of food or they don't have money to buy food. So we have found a way to do a door-to-door distribution. So people are being helped. Some are being sent money online. We are able to go into the neighborhoods, still practicing the social distancing guidelines, and deliver food to the people in their homes.
And so I do wonder, I see what you're doing there with House of Freedom. I'm wondering what the conversations are that you're having with other men of God, other pastors. What is the conversation you're having amongst yourselves as, as ordinary people? I mean, you're probably not asking the question, where is God in all of this? Because I think your training and everything, you're more certain of that. But what is that conversation amongst you in this time of great uncertainty? I'm just intrigued if you'd pull back the curtain.
So there's two things going on right now. One is, what do we do now? How do we manage the current crisis? How do you calm people down? How do you help people in the midst of their confusion? How do you help people with counseling? So there is a challenge now. And then, but for us as pastors, we're looking at the best ways, best practice to get across to people. But beyond the now, what happens in a post-COVID-19 world? Because surely we know we're going to come out of this. So how does this crisis affect the church of the future? So that's a conversation that's ongoing currently. So the questions are, would people still want to go to church? Would they want to go to the building? Would they still like to hug each other? Would they all be able to work? Will people want to work from home, do church from home? This is the conversation going on.
And, one of the things that, drives me with this show and, to acknowledge everybody who's working on the show, the whole team, it's very much our mission is the element of compassion and bringing compassion to the fore as we tell the story. Because, you've mentioned the hardships and the difficulties that many are facing. And also, micro and macro, even for our governments that want to undertake this, to a large extent, there are just the financial limitations that many countries on the continent face. That message of compassion, can you speak to that a little bit and how you're trying to spread that in this moment?
Well, it's in times of crisis, it's in times of difficulties, it's in times where people are going through challenges. They need, as I said earlier on, someone to come alongside, and that is the role of the church. The church brings compassion. The church brings love. The church brings care. And that's our work. So we are supposed to come out of the building and find the people who are hurting and come alongside them. That's what Jesus did. Jesus healed the sick. He cared for the poor. He had compassion. So we model the love of Christ. We model the love of Jesus. And that's why we're here. And we want to encourage people. The fact that you're going through a crisis situation does not mean God is not on the scene. God is the God of the mountain and the God of the valley. God is the God of light and the God of darkness. Most people would ask, where is God? And the question is, why do we only ask where is God in difficult times? He's there in the good times, but he's there also in the dark times. He's there in the difficult times. Now, unfortunately, not everyone can see. So the work and the role of the church is to come to a place where we explain to the people that God is there. Take Easter. You spoke about Easter, Isha. Did you know that the first Easter, and that was my message on Easter Sunday, because most people are used to going to church on Sunday. They love the noise, they love the crowds. But the very first Easter in the Bible, guess where the church was? Guess where the disciples were? It was a lockdown situation. They were afraid. Jesus had just been crucified. They were not even sure he had risen from the dead. So they were locked up, afraid of what was going to happen, didn't know who was going to be crucified next. And Jesus appeared to them in a room. And so we're teaching that Christianity doesn't mean you're not going to go through problems, but it's how can Christ meet you in the midst of your storm. So our faith teaches that Christ is not a security from the storms of life, but in the storms of life. So we speak peace, we speak calm. That's what Jesus brings. He brings the peace in the midst of the storm.
And I want to ask you, Dr. Rapu, before I let you go, we talked about the conversations that you're having as pastors. Nigeria is mixed, the Muslims and the Christians in significant numbers, roughly equal, depending where you are in the country. what's the communication? What's the outreach to, you know, the imams on the other side, and in terms of just, you know, again, coordination and solidarity in this moment where any man of God who has a congregation should be saying essentially the same thing?
Yes. What we do is I teach on working within your sphere of influence. So as a pastor, there are other pastors I am working with, other pastors I'm in a relationship with, and we are in a conversation, we're sharing, we're talking, and we're comparing notes and seeing how we can help people. And then we listen out for other initiatives where we can pull our resources together. Sometimes it's coming from the government, sometimes it's from other NGOs, and that's the way where there is an intersection. But in terms of reaching out to the imams, well, that's not my sphere of influence currently. So I work within my sphere of influence.
But I'd imagine you're all essentially on the same page, you know.
Yes, exactly. We're all on the same page, working together. Dr. Tony Rapu, it was such a pleasure having you on the show and you giving these words of comfort to so many. A lot of people, you know, commenting here on Facebook, saying, you know, thank you for lending your voice, saying, you know, great insights, and I'm really appreciating your insights today. So thank you so much. Right.
Be safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Be safe yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You know, we felt it to bring you that perspective there, and you know, we're also reaching out to imams to come on the show to talk about their messages to followers, to Muslims followers of the Muslim faith, because at this point with coronavirus, this is not about groups and divisions. It's about one human community and how we can support each other right now. So you will be hearing the Muslim perspective to this conversation in the days ahead. Another thing that you'll always hear on the show is information, or we're always going to try and pause to acknowledge those who have lost the fight against COVID-19. We think it's particularly important to honor the lives of those from the continent. So many have fallen due to this terrible disease. We're looking at over 119,000 deaths worldwide. And we're approaching 2 million cases right around the world. For context, in Africa, we're looking at over 16,000 cases and several hundred who have lost their lives. So, you know, we always want to pause and acknowledge the huge loss that is taking place around the world. And we want to take a minute now to tell you about one victim, Ahmed Ismail Hussein, also known as the King of Oud, recently lost his fight against the virus. The Somali musician was considered one of the giants of modern Somali music, captivating Somalis for generations. Writer Nadifa Mohammed posted this picture on Twitter with this message: "O soul, so run to your household and look for it where you once knew it." Hussein is credited with popularizing the traditional Somali style known as karami, and is known for playing the oud, an instrument central to Arab and Middle Eastern music. He fell in love with that instrument at 14, saying once, "If there's an oud line near me, I've just got to play it." The 91-year-old musician will be missed dearly. For all those who've lost loved ones, our thoughts and our prayers are with you in this very difficult time. All right, let's share some of your thoughts now. A lot of you writing in, and so grateful for all of you that have stayed with us. 40 minutes past the hour. A lot of people really responded to the words from the pastor there, Pastor Tony Rapu. Namdi Zurike said, "Thank you, Dr. Tony Rapu, for your perspective." Anderele Edwards, I guess, felt this real connection to his words, "God of the mountain is still God in the valley," which I thought was really powerful. Sharon Cole, great perspective from Dr. Tony Rapu. Adejuigbi Tosin said, "Christ is not the security from storms, but security even within the storms of life. So the pastor's words really resonating with a lot of people. I thank you for all the kind words about the show. Thank you for staying with us. Every day we're here, Monday through Friday, to bring you this comprehensive picture. So many people writing from across the continent. We have people from Kenya, GD Understanding, big up from Kenya 254. Thank you. We appreciate it. And people talking about the testing on the continent as well and how we need to scale that up. And lots of people also responding to Dr. Yao from WHO and what he was saying, just saying that African countries need to take steps and to do more to get ready for this. Ayong Blessé, watching from Cameroon, thank you for your kind words. And I'm just really grateful to all of you. Lots of comments. We're going to continue to give shout outs to everyone. This one, it just says D, who's saying the situation in Senegal, that essentially the centralization of relief efforts remain a political campaign. Effectively, this mixture of politics in this health crisis is problematic. I'm going to stay now with Senegal and switch gears and talk to you about the economic hit that we're all fearing is fast approaching the continent. The African Union and a host of people, including McKinsey and co, the management consultants, have all written reports trying to do some forecasting of what the continent is facing with this pandemic. And really the concern is that we are looking at budget shrinking, looking at growth contracting, and looking at millions of jobs being lost. Sub-Saharan Africa facing its first recession in 25 years, which is a terrifying thought. This pandemic is going to hit every sector. That's the expectation, from tourism to construction. I mean, just you name it. And retail is also caught up in all of this. We want to get a sense of what retail is looking at, what the hit could be, and what people are doing right now to prepare. Let's bring in Cheick Sanakoua and to discuss all of this. He's co-founder of HC Capital Properties, and in fact, I'm Spooky joining us from Abidjan. Cheick, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Can you hear me now?
I can. Can you hear me clearly?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's good to have you with us. Talk to me about what you are seeing, what you're feeling right now as this public health crisis takes hold there in Africa. I know that you are the lead investors, you and your group, in a mall. Talk to me about your experiences.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a very interesting experience because there is a lot of different worlds out there. I think there's the formal world that you and I would know with the corporates, where you have the formal economy, and then you have the informal sector. And as you know, in our economies, the informal sector takes a large chunk of the economy. And the way the crisis is being felt and lived in both communities is a bit different. It's almost like night and day. So in the corporate world, a lot of the measures that were put in place by the government have been respected. So corporates basically have their employees working from home. People are not really going out as much. And there's a lot of light traffic in the city when you go to the CBD and some of the more developed neighborhoods. Now, when you go into the more populous neighborhoods that have middle income, lower middle income, and more poor populations, then it's a bit of a difference. You could almost feel like, well, nothing is happening. Sure, you have a lot of people with masks. You see people that have hand sanitizing lotions, people on the streets selling masks, lotions, etc. But by and large, the social distancing is not being respected. And as you can imagine, in economies where, let's say, 40 to 50% of the people need to get out every day to earn a living, to feed themselves, it's very hard to enforce the measures of confinement. And because the government hasn't decided to take it all the way, there's a curfew, but during the day people can go out and about and are supposed to respect the distancing, and only the essential shops are supposed to be open. But in the informal economy, well, people that sell cell phones, from people that sell foods. Basically, everybody is open. So it makes it a bit difficult to see how this is going to be managed in the medium term. If, as we've seen in other markets, the contagion is exponential, and we just have to hope that with the realities of the ground, the fact that maybe the or warmer, etc., maybe the immune system of people are a bit stronger, that people are able to resist, but none of that is proven yet. Yeah. And the next 2 to 3 weeks are going to be critical.
As you say, the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're looking to see what happens as case numbers do continue to rise in some parts of the continent exponentially. I mean, so what do you do now? I mean, as a business owner, as a storm approaches, what do you do?
Yeah, the first measure, so we run a mall, we have about 50 tenants. Our mall is in middle income to lower middle income neighborhood. So it's not a high-end mall, it's positioned more as a convenience retail mall. And we have a lot of essential services. So the supermarkets, some of the foods, a lot of services. We have a clinic, the banks, the ATMs, etc., etc. So a good 50 to 60% of our tenants are essential tenants that are still open. And then the remainder are what you can call non-essential. So that's your fashion and your accessories. And given where we are and the measures that the government took, then 2 weeks ago, we shut down some of these businesses. So, the first level was to take measures to protect our staff and the shop owners and put measures in place. So, putting markings on the ground. We installed hand washing stations. We had to get emergency temperature takers. So we take the temperature of everybody that comes in. They have to wash their hands. Then they get some gel. We shut down the food court. So for the restoration, you can only do takeaway and delivery. And within the shops, we have people going around making sure that you have no more than 50 people in any confined space, and a little bit more in the shopping center because it's a bigger space. So, we've had to switch in crisis mode and also prepare ourselves. I think one of your earlier guests was mentioning the potential for looting, right? So as people are getting to this phase where it's hard to make ends meet, and the next phase is to go and look for food, and the one place you know there's going to be food is us, so we are target. Yeah. So we have to protect ourselves and our staff and everybody during the day and also at night. So we have more people that are securing the perimeter to just make sure we have no surprises.
How real is that possibility for you in your mind? I mean, just how concerned are you that you are approaching that place of instability?
Listen, my job is to worry. So you hope for the best, you prepare for the worst. So we're very realist about this. So it's a possibility where it's very high likelihood, medium likelihood, is neither here nor there. We just have to be ready, even if it's a 1% chance. You cannot go back to our investors and say that we were looted because we didn't take this seriously. Yeah. So we take everything seriously. We go overboard in everything that's health and security. And what's happening, actually, our formal shopping environment is very important because in some of the informal market, people have started to speculate, right? So prices of basic things, oil, rice, sugar has gone up. The one place you know that the price is always going to be the same is the shopping center. And the second thing, in the environment, we're making sure people respect the social distancing, temperature is taken, that their hands are sanitized. So if you need to go to the telecom or the bank within the mall, it's a safer environment than if you go and try to do it on the street. So actually, we've become a kind of a strategic and vital area for people to come and get their basic needs taken care of. And because of that, we have to make sure that we can keep doing that, even if we reach the point of total confinement, because we're not going to totally shut down people will still need to come and get some of these basic things done.
I mean, you mentioned investors just now. You have investors. You work in private equity, and you're invested in this more. But for a lot of the informal traders, the smaller guys and smaller women, it's a very different situation. Everything they own is involved in their trade. I mean, how do folk come back from this? I mean, what do you see as the road ahead and the path to recovery?
It's going to depend on the scenarios. I often listen to economists on TV talk about the shape of the recovery in letters: L shape, U shape, V shape, W shape. I mean, who knows? But what's very clear is that you're going to have, in my mind, two different groups. You're going to have the group of people or retailers that fill an essential needs, and you're going to have the ones that fill the non-essential needs. Because in times of hardship, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you fill out first the most important need, which is food, some of these basic things before you get into the disposable income. So for the basic needs, no matter what the shape is, people are most likely going to be okay, right? Especially when they have a positioning value for money, when people's wallets shrink. Now for non-essential, then it's going to be very tricky if you're in clothing, shoes, accessories, etc. Because as you're saying, everybody's at home, so people are probably shopping a little bit less for makeup and clothes, shoes, and all these things. So they're suffering more. And for the ones that were already suffering before the crisis, then this might be the final nail in the coffin. So there's going to be a little bit of survival of the fittest within the non-essential field, and that's where the government and what the government do, what programs are put in place to help these mom and pop and SMEs will make the difference. But for people that weren't doing great before this, it's going to be very tough to make it out of it.
Yeah. And that's just the sad truth. Cheick, Sanakoua, I can't thank you enough for all you've shared today. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and telling us what's happening, what you're seeing. Thank you so much. Please be safe.
You too. Take care, and great show.
Thank you. Thank you. When you hear it laid out like that, again, it drives it home. There is a lot of economic hardship on the horizon for a lot of people in Africa and beyond. It's deeply worrying, deeply troubling, and we just have to wait now and just see what happens next. The storm is coming. There's no getting away from that. It is coming, and it's coming right around the world. The question is, how hard does it hit Africa? We will be watching. Okay, as we bring today's show to a close, we do what we always do, which is finish on a brighter note. We call it the bright side. As tough as it is, as we talk about gloomy predictions and the concern for the future, we also believe that it's important for us to hold on to our hope, our inspiration, to find the joy that we can find in this moment, because it's essential for coping. It's essential for making our way through this, because we will make it through. So we need to do everything possible to support that process. Today, the joy comes courtesy of former NBA basketball player and general manager of the capital city Go-Go Pops. Go-Go, as I merged Pops' name there. Pops Mensah Bonsu is our bright side. And take a look at how he's coping in these difficult times with life under lockdown. Take a look.
As you can see here, 2 of my kids are ages 3 and 5 years old. Like all parents, we have to find creative ways to engage and have fun with them during this lockdown. Ooh, you gotta pick it up for your second. My daughter is here, as you can see. She's learning how to bowl and have fun at the same time while in the house. Yep. My son is also learning good hygiene habits with his the way he's washing his hands. We're trying to create good habits in him so that after this quarantine and lockdown is over, he can continue having these habits. My kids also like to play, even when it's time for daddy to work out. And I love it because it keeps them engaged and allows me to get a workout in at the same time. You guys are so heavy. I'm also love to stay in shape, and I want to come out of this quarantine the same way I went in. So I don't want to be a couch potato and like to work out as much as I can.
Those are some serious push-ups that Pops is doing there. That was a little sneak peek into Pops' life. You got a sense of how he's holding it all together with kids who are bowling and climbing all over him. I have so many questions about that setup. And thankfully, the man himself will be live with me in just a few minutes over on Instagram. We are going to pick up the conversation there with Pops. So I ask you to grab a cup of tea, grab a comfortable spot, and we are going to have a fun-filled conversation because we could all do with some light relief. So join me over on Instagram for the bright side. We call it the bright side overtime. Join me there in just a few minutes. But before I go, just want to remind you, I'll be right back here for Home with Isha Sesay every day, Monday through Friday. Meet me back here tomorrow. I'll have the very latest on what's happening on the continent when it comes to this coronavirus pandemic, all the latest news, insightful conversations. I do hope you'll make time to be with me once more. That's it from me right here, but meet me in a couple of minutes on Instagram with Pops for the bright side. See you tomorrow. Be safe, everyone.